the generations have passed. I mean, man's been doing this since man was here. Since kicked out of Garden Eden, he probably started bow hunting. And it just, there's just such a peace to it. It's like going home, it's like, yeah, this is what we really are. Hey, you can't get feeling any better than that.
Now, Alan, another big subject that we've alluded to it a little bit so far here, but another big subject we wanted to talk to you about is your thoughts on when you're hunting a specific buck, trying to kill a specific buck, versus if you're just trying to be more of an opportunist and you're just hunting for a mature buck, but not so much a specific one. And we were having a conversation about this on the way up here about mine and Jacob's different hunting styles, where he's much more of an opportunist. Like, he's just trying to find a really good spot where he's going to have a buck walk in front of him. And I kind of straddle in between it. And I think that's one of my problems I have from year to year is I'll locate bucks that I want to kill, that I really want to kill, but I don't usually drill down really hard trying to just kill those deer. I still hunt like an opportunist, but I want to kill the specific deer. And I think a lot of people can probably relate with that. So just as an opener for that conversation, what are your thoughts on that? Is it way different going after a specific buck versus just hunting mature deer at large?
Yes and no. Because both of what you're wanting to do, there's one way you can accomplish the same thing. What do you think that is? The absolute topographical features of the area that the deer have to cross through. So if I'm going to do both, if I've got like, Big Louie over here, that we're wanting to kill, but I know that his brother Joe is almost as good, and I would put an arrow through him, I'm going to find those spots in there, the highest percentage of where deer have to travel through. Have to. There's certain features, and I say topographical. It may be man-made. It may be, I don't know. There's just different things can take place in the woods. It may be like the hurricane last fall, man. It fried everything for us real quick, because it wasn't just blowdowns. It was impassable blowdowns in the woods. I mean, places you still can't get through or get into. So try to find those, whether it's a creek crossing, a bluff, saddle. You hear a lot saddles, but there'll be, the way they round the end of an ridge at some, and some things make zero sense to me. I go in and I look at something and I'm like, this is so much easier. Why are you doing this? And to this day, there's places like it I've looked at for 50 years, and I still can't tell you why. Well, guess what? I don't need to know why. I just know I can kill my deer right there. But there's certain things like that take place. So that's what I would do in those places. If it's an individual buck, be realistic with it. Be realistic. Don't be what you see on TV, what you see on YouTube. Well, I can do this. This will work. What I can do that. Whoever that is that's filming that stuff, they've never hunted that buck. You can take a certain percentages, certain odds, but you have to figure out what works for that animal. And a really good example. We all know same guy just killed an absolute mega buck here a couple of years ago, and me and him had talked about this buck and strategies on it a lot. But there was one place that buck was being consistent at, one spot, and impossible to kill with a bow. Couldn't do it. I mean, where this spot was, you could forget about it. If you were down where this buck was at, he had you. And because a lot of these areas, let me say that these big deer are the most consistent at, have this wind. It's a cyclonic wind. It's a circle. Sooner or later, everything doubles. It may be doing this. But it's going to have that counterclockwise rotation to it there. But you could get up above it, the rifle, and be out of that rotation up here where you had a more consistent wind, get a shot. And and that just complete brilliance to realize that I want to kill him right here and I'm going to kill him with the butt. Well, it ain't going to happen. That's why he's here. And that's a thing to remember, that there's a reason these animals, especially your bigger mature animals, are there. It's a reason they're there. They've got the advantage there. So you do have to find those edges in there. So if I was going after, like, let me think, some individual bucks. I'll give you an example here. The big drop time buck in there I was showing you there, that 12 I was telling you about. I found this buck where he was bedding on Thursday evening. Okay. He's bedding in just a narrow little strip ditch line. Finding rubs in there, here. I saw 3-4 rubs. I accidentally walked right in on his bed, which he's bedding just inside of the field edge where what the wind wasn't carrying to him. He could see anything coming down into this bottom and disappear out of. So second I saw that, I turned boots out. And I actually went and drove the vehicle up and down through there a couple of times because they were picking up hay. So, and I was scouting it while they were picking up hay rolls. So there were people in there, and they know the difference between a farmer and a hunter. They know the threat level's different. So I looked at that and it's like, how can I kill him in there? I can't get in there to hunt. I can't go in from the backside. I don't have permission to come across that way. How can I kill him? I've got to get him in a weather front. So I set 200 yards off of that, set a stand at a point, and I thought, if I get a really bad wind system in here, that he can't bed and have his nose in there for the rest of it, he's probably going to bed whatever wind, where he can get the wind to his at, or visually. I knew this buck relied on his eyes a lot too. And so we happened to have a front that blew in that was just, it was awful. Rain, pouring, everything. And I thought, that rascal will be laying inside the ridge over in those big cedar thickets somewhere with this weather. They can look down, see everything above them. The wind's coming across the ridge from the back, dumping over down thermals. And it's a big ridge. But I was like, when this weather breaks, he's wanting to get back into that sanctuary where he is. How's he going to go? And I went and I said, had this stand already set. And I sat in there. The sun popped out. Started getting calls. Scott killed a buck. His first buck I was telling you about. Ethan shot at 8. Or Ethan shot his maybe before I did. But anyway, sit there. And right near dark, the wind died. It just, that front blew through, and you know how get close to sunset, how it does, and that's one of the, and the second I saw that wind changing, I stood up, bow in hand. I hadn't even pulled an arrow out of the quiver yet. I pulled an arrow out of the quiver, stood up, and started looking toward that cedar thicket. And within 10 minutes, I saw 2 big bucks walking right to me. And I shot him. He was like at 20, I don't remember, 23, 26 steps, which is a longer shot than I usually will take. But second I drew back, I knew he was dead. When I saw him, I knew he was. It just, you get that feeling like, yeah. But when I hit anchor, I said, Lord, just let me do my best. And that's exactly what I just whispered. And I said, just let me do my best. And if I'd missed him, I'd have been 100% with that, because I'd already done it. And I, be honest, I don't care that much about killing him. I like being able to hunt him. And if I could, I would let every one of them go just to hunt him again another day. And there's a lot of days a big buck will walk by me right now, and I will come to draw, or I will sit there at least with my bow out and put a little tension, because I told you, when I hit right here, sometimes I got this affliction. But you know, and I'm just happy as can be because it worked, what I thought. But that day it worked, and I heart shot him. He ran, and I watched him tumble. And but that one, I was after that individual buck. And so what I did, I didn't know from where I saw he was at, I could look at it and say he's using his eyes and he's using his nose and he's using thermals. That's what he's taking advantage of. This buck is a thermal buck, and this buck is a visual buck. So what I looked at, where if he was not where he was the most comfortable, where he would be using that in another area the same way under different conditions. And that's how I identified where I thought, and it was a lucky guess. You know, it was a guess of odds, but I recognized when I found where this buck was, I saw what he likes. And again, thermals, he read thermals, and he was visual. So then when everything changed, I just looked and said, where would he be now? And then this is his primary area he's coming to. What's he going to need to do to get to here? And that's that spot. And I went to the spot in between. And, it was one of the, if you check off boxes, it's stuff that you got real lucky on, or you made the right decisions, that was one of them. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that answers your question, but it just, and again, that's the thing with you guys that I maybe get across. You don't have to know everything about this deer. You don't have to on an individual buck. Recognize certain things he likes. Again, what type of trees does he like to rub? Does he like to, what time of day are you seeing them? Like there's a buck I hunted for, I probably saw a buck when he was maybe 4 years old, and I killed the buck. He was 3 or 4, and I'm trying to remember now. I don't want to tell you wrong, but I'm thinking 9 years later I killed him, or 6 years later I killed this buck. And where he was at, couldn't kill him. I hunted him. I saw the buck probably 50 times over years. And I tried everything I knew. And he would right at the crack of daylight get into this big bowl, this big thicket. I'd see him go into it, when I would see him. And it was just like, you'd be straining with your binoculars, but when you saw, he looked like he was just a pig, big old belly hanging. You knew it was him. Couldn't even see his horns, but I was like, man, I just need a little more daylight. I just need him moving daylight. And so I had to stop and think. I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. How am I going to I can't get close to him, but how am I going to get him to move a little later in the day? And so here's how him and Ethan and Dalton, first time I told them, it got them. I just changed the time of daylight. So what happens? I had 4 or 5 days, heavy overcast, nasty weather. Well, these animals, just like us, they have this built-in, what is it called, the diurnal clock. You know, when daylight pops, like me, I wake up at the crack of daylight every morning. I mean, just barely. That's when I wake up. I just automatically know it's there. Well, 4 or 5 days, instead of getting light at 7, say 7, and at arbitrary time, 7:35, it was hitting daylight because of the cloud cover closer to 8 o'clock. Well, guess what happened in the middle of the night? That front blew out. Crystal clear blue sky. That buck's daylight perception of daylight falling was falling at close to 8 o'clock. Well, 7:40 that morning, it got daylight. And he come by me. I was 100 yards, 200 yards off of where he went into these thickets somewhere along through there. And I'm sitting there, and because of it getting daylight earlier, he's still moving on that week-long schedule of dark. And I took advantage. It hit me when I thought about that. I thought, man, he might just get caught with his pants down out a little late this morning. That's exactly what happened to him. And I, even with that buck, I knew he walked this fence line, but even that morning, I thought to myself, if he gets caught that earlier, he's going to be down off in the bottom a little more in the darker woods further in than he normally travels. And I actually dumped down under the hill probably 50 yards lower than I normally would hunt, because I thought he would move to that side and be taking a little advantage of coming over top of the hill, thermal down through there. And that's what he did. The way he came around that spur, and I killed him. And I walked up on him, and I'm like, holy cow, you know. But it was knowing that 1 or 2 little traits of that buck and characteristics he had that then I could take advantage of at that moment. And, you know, and I did the same thing on a buck off the ground the very last day of rifle season. I shot him. I was standing up against a big tree as he was coming through a corner. Did the same thing to him a few years ago with this bow, and shot him coming in. And it was the only place I could kill him, but it's like, man, and I wouldn't have tried that if it was his last day of season. I knew he was coming through this area, but if I'd tried it a month before, I would have completely thrown his pattern off, which somebody else would have killed him, or I'd have never gotten an opportunity at him. But I was like, it's the last day of season. What have I got to lose if I blow him out? Nobody else is stupid enough to be out here this cold, you know, on this last day of season. And but it worked for him. But it's picking out for the individual buck, figure out the individual traits of him and where you can take advantage of those, what you've learned from him.
Over the years, we've interviewed quite a few successful ground hunters when it comes to bow hunting, and the commonalities between all of them is using the shadows to their advantage. Having overhead cover, back cover, and a little bit of front cover that adds a little bit more shadows to their setup, which allows them to hide a lot easier. That's what we've done today, and built this brush blind for Andrew to come in here with his recurve and shoot some does, hopefully early season when these white oaks behind the camera are going to be dropping. One important thing about blending in the shadows is having something that works camel-wise in the shadows, and that's one thing I like about this mossy oak woodsman leaf jacket. Is it's a little bit darker in color, and to me blends in a little bit better to the shadows during early season when you have full leaves on those trees. This is something I'm going to keep in my backpack all season because it's really compact, it's really lightweight, and breathes really well, and I really won't need it until I need it, but it's going to be in my backpack the whole time, which is really nice because of how compact it is. So if you're interested in ground hunting a little bit this year or having extra concealment up in the tree, check out the Mossy Oak Woodsman Leaf Jacket at mossyoak.com.
One thing we talk about with almost every guest on this show is map scouting. My favorite map scouting tool is LiDAR. If you're unfamiliar, LiDAR is basically like a 3D scan of the Earth's surface. I like to say it kind of takes away all the surprises. LiDAR is now available on onX Hunt on their topography map. If you go to your app right now, click on the topography map, you can flip on that LiDAR feature and boom, it's gonna come on and you're gonna see what I'm talking about. The LiDAR is gonna allow you to see things that are normally hidden from view. This might be ditches, bends and creeks, rocks, old road beds. I personally love old road beds because deer like to walk them. They're great places to find scrapes. They're great camera locations. And you know, before, an old roadbed or an old logging road might be something that you kind of happen upon while you're out scouting or hunting. Well, now with the LiDAR, before I go into an area, I can turn on that LiDAR and I can see exactly where those roadbeds are. Even old logging roads from the 1930s, you can still see them on there. So that allows me to go straight to those spots and check them out. It's just an incredibly helpful tool, and it's available now on onX Hunt. And hey, if you want to get 20% off your onX Elite membership, you can use the promo code SOUTHERN. Like I said, it's going to save you 20%. Go check out that LiDAR feature. You'll be glad you did. Know where you stand with onX Hunt.
If you want to get a head start on deer season, you can go out and you can actually scout feed trees in summer. This is something we've been talking about on the podcast quite a bit lately. Today I'm out here, I've got a pair of Vortex Viper HDs. This is a great pair of binoculars for this. And what we're doing is we're just looking up into these oak trees, looking to see if we can see the little acorn buds on the limbs. So as summer goes on, it's going to get easier and easier to see those buds as they get larger. A tip for that is when you're looking up in the tree, you want to find a limb that's daylighted. It's just nothing but daylight behind it. You're looking at an isolated limb, and you're just going to want to pick that thing apart with a good pair of binos like these that are clear. I like to use a trekking pole and actually brace the binos on the trekking pole and sit down underneath that tree and really look at it for a while. So if you want to get a head start scouting feed trees this summer, go get you a pair of Vortex binoculars, head on over to eurooptic.com, use the code SOUTHERN10 and it's going to get you a discount on these binoculars or any other optics that Vortex sells.
There's more of you guys getting into saddle hunting than ever before, and a common question we always get is how do you get comfortable in a saddle, because there's so many moving parts. And today I'm going to give you 3 of the best tips that I have for getting comfortable in the saddle after doing this for about 8.5 years. Number 1 is tether height. Setting your tether at the right height is going to give you extreme comfort, but this is one big reason why you need to practice with it. I like mine right at nose level when I'm standing on the platform. The other is your bridge length. Having an adjustable bridge on your saddle makes it extremely comfortable to fine-tune that comfort, and I like mine extended out almost all the way. The third is how you sit in your saddle. Some people like the saddle sitting just below the belt line, which I've done in some saddles in the past. That made it more comfortable. Some are right at the belt line, and some are a little bit above the belt line. Now, having a very comfortable saddle makes it really easy to do all this stuff with less adjustment. And the Lone Star saddle from Latitude Outdoors is that saddle for me personally. I really like this saddle, and I really like the hip pinch reduction system that's built into the saddle that gives me a lot more comfort all day long with less adjustments needed. If you want to check out the Lone Star saddle from Latitude Outdoors, you can go to latitudeoutdoors.com for more information.
I gotta ask, what's the fastest you are able to locate a buck and kill a specific deer that you've hunted?
Oh, I've shot some the same day once I've located them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because one thing, we haven't touched on this, you don't use trail cameras. You're not a big trail camera guy, which is going to be surprising for some people here and like talking about hunting specific deer, not using trail cameras. You already talked about kind of finding certain signs that kind of keys you on. More than likely, it's the same kind of buck. And we mentioned previously about tracks and identifying big tracks and so on. That's something that I'm really interested in learning more about is the identification process, and just you're such a good woodsman. And the thing about being a great woodsman, it's hard to articulate how you do things. It's like second nature. Like you're trying to put it into words, but if we went in the field with you, you just like, okay, this is where the buck's coming through. This is where I'd kill him at. And we're like, why, how, what? And you're like, just based off what I'm seeing, my feeling, gut feeling, this is the spot. And it's one of those things that it takes years and so much experience in asking why. Maybe not always trying to find all the answers, but finding just enough to kind of key you in on what you're looking for to give you the right opportunity. What do you think a lot of hunters do wrong about hunting specific deer, especially if they're maybe using trail cameras?
preconceived ideas. That's it. Trail cams give you a false sense of security or jerk the rug out under your feet. Just because he's not on your trail cam, again, he may have smelled it and walked 5. He may be on the back side of it. Let me give you an example right now. You know, I got this 16-year-old, and Gabe's my world, you know, hunting-wise. If I never kill another deer in my life and can just watch him, I'm happy as can be. Well, I told y'all earlier, you know, we'd been trad hunters, and Gabe's killed, you know, I mean, as a kid hunting trad bow and wood arrows, he's done very well. But he came to me this year, and he's like last year he was after his piebald, and he had the thing inside probably 20, 25 yards 3 times, could not get a shot with his trad bow. Last year, the buck's gone. I'm sure somebody's killed him. I passed him up a few times, and there's another big 9 that he was after, and he just, I mean, have it point blank, but a trad bow's harder. And he just, you know, he wasn't going to take a 20-yard shot. And so kudos to him. But he come to me here a few weeks ago or a month or 2 ago, and he's like, I was telling you, you know, Dad, you're going to be disappointed, but I need to talk to him. I'm like, oh, crap, what's this? And he's like, I'd really like to shoot a compound this year, but if you say no, no. I was like, dude, I got no problem with that. I said, I love shooting a compound, you know, and hunting with them and stuff. I said, actually, I probably get more excited, you know, years ago over shooting one of the compound than I do now with the recurve or self bow. And I was like, it's you, it's not me. I said, I just hunt with trad bows because, you know, I like hunting with the trad bow. And I said, nothing wrong with that. He said, really? I'm like, absolutely. And so then he was like, well, what? You know, I'd let him get a trail cam and he'd put it out. And so he said, well, you really care if I use trail cam? I said, go for it. I said, if that's what you want to do, do it. And he's ended up buying 3 or 4 and got them up. But he's looking at them right now. And I'm letting something build up, and I'll tell him within the next few days this, but he's not realizing like he was getting all these photos, all of these different bucks and stuff. And now he's only getting photos of them either real early morning at a couple of stands, which I won't let him go to because it's my trad stand. I did tell him with the compound, he doesn't hunt my trad stands. That's just going to be the thing. I've got my 5-yard shot set up. No, you've got other stands, and it's time you start finding your own too. So, but the rest of them, all the photos are nighttime, and he's not realized that. And I'm waiting to hear him say it, because when he does say it to me, I'm gonna go to him and say, it's because you're going to those stands too much. They know you're there. They're smelling you, and they're just coming in at night. That's the whole reason they're there. And so you probably need to say your question to me again.
But just like, what's the issue? Where do people go wrong using trail cameras trying to hunt specific deer?
So that's one thing. A lot of times they let the deer know you're in the area, whether you're checking them too much or they just realize it's a trail cam. Gabe gets frustrated. Not frustrated. Well, I don't know if that's a word to put, but like when we go in and set a trail cam, I've set it up at 7.5, 8 feet, my reach, angling down, shooting, so the deer is not seeing it right there. And I'll try to kind of like around some limbs coming out or something, just so it's a knot on the tree. And so I think that's one thing. But the other is they feel like just where they're seeing photos of it is where this deer is at. And that's what say if it's shooting at 125, shooting at 125th of a second flash on it. That's that's 1 second in that deer's life that That's it. That's 1 second. So if you got one over here, that's 1 second. Well, what's happened in this quarter mile between these two cams? You know, what's happened there? Is it gone here to here? You know, I mean, you can now positive. I can look at something and tell, especially on a roving buck. Okay, he's traveling this linear pattern. This is a walk because he's here. Well, that might give you an advantage. You know, if you're going to hunt that afternoon, you maybe, hey, he's down here a half mile or mile. You know, there's some advantage, but I don't. This is personal feelings on this for me, but I sometimes I don't feel like that's, I won't say fair chase, but I don't want to know it much about it. I'm trying to beat him at his game, and I don't want to beat him. I don't know how to put this. I don't want to win by technology. You know, I want to win like hunter prey, and I can't do it in Tennessee, and I've got to try to find. I want to kill a deer with a spear at some point.
Gotta go to Arkansas.
Yeah, well, if I can do it, I probably will. You know, and I want to build, you know, I mean, a flint napper, and I hunt with, you know, self bow and stone points a lot. But I thought about, I want to make my own spear and kill, you know, a stone spear and kill a deer. I would love to do that. But I just want to, you know, be that hunter. It's like fly fishing. I've gone in and I've caught some big trout. And I actually caught our state record rainbow too. So he's been beaten since then. But I can think of a big brown trout up here that I knew where it was feeding, and I finally caught him. And I mean, he's a big brown on a dry fly. And after I caught him back feeding the same place, and I didn't go back over and try to catch him. I didn't want to catch him the same way because I'd figured it out there. I want to go and maybe another day. And I've caught this fish actually 3 different times over 3 or 4 years. And I know it's the same one because he's got these real cool triangle on his jaw. But, you know, just I want to be a hunter, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I talk about fly fishing. I hunt big fish too. So
me and Jacob are fighting over questions here. I can relate with what you said earlier about like the trail camera can either give you a false sense of security or it can yank the rug out from underneath you. I have experienced that so much over the last couple of years. Exactly what you're talking about, because you might be getting that deer on camera a whole bunch and it gives you the confidence to go in there, and a lot of times it doesn't work out. Like maybe I thought too much about just the deer being on my camera and I didn't think enough about my access or my exit route or why the deer was there or where he was coming from. Yeah. Or the other way around, maybe he quit showing up and I just wasn't hunting in there anymore, and then someone else goes in there and kills a buck, which has happened to me several times.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of people also with trail cameras, this is what I wanted to kind of interject with, they try to put the camera right where they want to hunt and they think they're going to kill the deer in front of that camera. Because we've interviewed individuals who are very successful using cameras, trying to figure out a general pattern and then figure out a separate ambush point based off what they're learning, but they're not trying to kill them right where the camera's at.
Yeah.
And I think cameras are so easy to use, especially cell cameras, and people think they can kill the deer right over where that camera is. And there are people that do that. But I think that's where a lot of people get, mess up because they overpressure spot. They get that buck maybe, he's 45 minutes, before end of legal light showing up, and then, or maybe just after legal light, I think I can catch him. They go and pressure the spot, and the buck realizes that, and then he's gone for a little while. He's not coming to that little area, at least during daylight hours. And I do feel like for some people and some people's personalities, it makes you overhunt a certain spot and or try to sit right on top of a camera versus using woodsmanship and actually figuring out other spots that you can catch that buck at during daylight.
Here's the thing about a trail cam and this is like, you have to evaluate yourself. Have to really be truthful with yourself on it. the trail cam is just another piece of the puzzle, or is it your tool to make it happen? And by another piece of the puzzle, if you just use that as, okay, this is that bit of information. Okay, I know he's walking through here, but now let's find where he's feeding, his tracks, his rubs, his directional, bedding and this and that. It just lets you know he's there, and you do it along those lines. That's, that works for you. It's a great tool. But too many people's like, okay, I've got him now. And they completely forget about the rest. And, the woodsmanship part, the being a hunter. And, I don't know. I look at my setups are a trapping set. Just like I'm going to catch a coyote. I've been lucky enough to go with a guy trapping mountain lions. It's just like if I'm going to catch a coyote or any other animal in a trap. When I set up on an animal to hunt him with a stand, I'm set up the same way. And that's what I was telling y'all earlier. And just all the listeners, I hunt the trad bow. This is my self bow I hunt with. And it's fence posts that got that I made into a bow. But I have to be close. So I have to do things right. I have to know where that buck almost is going to set his feet. And so I have to learn and do it right. And so it makes me a better hunter because I'll make a whole lot more mistakes than I will get it right. But man, when I get it right, it feels so good, And I was talking with Gabe about what I was talking earlier. It's funny, like I kill a deer with this self bow. Excuse me. There's not really an excitement to it. It's just, man, I feel at home. That's the only way to put it. Like I've been gone a long time and I just at home and I'm at peace. Last year, I shot, and it's a small buck. Ethan's father died, Stanley Roderick, and it kind of blowed everybody. And Ethan sent me Stanley's glove. So my only goal last year was kill a deer with Stanley's glove. Because he shot the same glove I did. And I ended up, it was a spike, and it come in. I shot him at 3 yards, This was trad stuff, as good as it gets. And I shot that thing, and I went and I just sat down with that deer and just looked at it. And sat in the fall woods and smell it and feel it and, think about, Stanley and how... the generations have passed. I mean, man's been doing this, since man was here. Since kicked out of Garden Eden, he probably started bow hunting. And it just, there's just such a peace to it. It's like going home, it's like, yeah, this is what we really are. And it just, you can't get feeling any better than that. And I'll say another thing, you've seen some of my bucks. I've been blessed. I mean, I've killed from bison to bear, lion, everything, all this stuff. But I get just as excited over shooting if I decide to shoot a 70-pound doe as I do if I kill, a 180-inch buck. I mean, it's just the only difference for me is that, man, I may still get buck fever, so a doe coming in or something, and get excited over it. But it seems like when a big buck comes in, it just goes all business. And the reason is because in my head, I'm telling myself, you got this one opportunity, you got to make it count. And, Roger Rothar talked about I think the difference between him and a lot of people is when he got the opportunity, he made it count. And, I'm out here, shooting my bows every day. And I told you You put a 3D target up there, give me 5 or 6 shots, and I'll be lucky to hit the ground behind it. But you throw a leaf out there in the yard or something, and I'll hit it, or be within an inch. I'll be in that 4-inch circle around it. And with these things, if it's an animal, more than likely I'm gonna kill it. But I try to keep my stuff set up to where I hunt for a 5-yard shot, 5 to 10-yard shots. And when I say I got to do everything right, I mean it's everything. The draw, your clothes have to be perfect. So you will see me out here very shortly wearing Asbel wool and sweatshirts on it, heavy clothes and stuff out. One shot at a time. That's it. And I may sit there with my bow for 1 minute up, just standing like this and never moving. And coming to draw, maybe holding, let down, stand there for another 3 minutes, then back to draw and make the shot. And that's the way I practice. I practice like I'm getting ready to actually kill an animal. And because when I do get those opportunities, as close as I have to be, I can't have feathers brushing against my leg, which with arrows as long as I have here, I have to watch that all the time. And like last year, year before last, I greenhorned one. I turned around and started shooting, and boom, I didn't think about the seat on my, I had to twist funny and shot too quick, and I didn't bring my bow. My limb hit the seat of but laugh about it. And another thing is, you just don't take it that serious. If you miss one, so what? You get to hunt him again another day. That big wide buck I showed y'all out there, I think he's a 10 or 11. He's like 21, 22 inches. I missed that buck, stinking point blank. 8 yards, 13 yards. I missed him, and that's my kill. 13 yards is my kill shot. That's just my natural point right there. And I shot that far under that deer. And I'm like, and I sit down, laughed about it, but killed him a month later. But that time, I made sure, I did everything right. I did get excited, but if you miss one, so what? If you don't get the shot, but don't go in and do stuff like, trying to push a shot where you wound him or hurt him, or don't push your hunts to where you blow him out of the area. Just take your time. It's just a deer. I don't care if he's 180 or if it's, it's just a deer. Have respect for him.
Well, I always love talking to guys like yourself. Like, the fact that you still get so much enjoyment out of hunting. You've killed so many deer. You're talking about how fired up you got about that spike last year. Oh, you've literally got a wall full of booners behind us in the other room. So I always love talking to guys like you for that reason. But you made a really good, interesting point about how hunting with the traditional bow is a lot like your sets for trapping. And the crazy thing about trapping, and you kind of touched on this in an earlier conversation, but is that in all those acres of woods that you can get him to step on that 1-inch trap pan. Mm-hmm. And that takes knowing your game, like knowing your quarry, knowing the environment, and it's just a certain skill set. You got to be on a different level to do that. And I've been wondering this entire time about this, because when we were in the backyard earlier shooting, you're like, yeah, I haven't shot a deer in a couple of years further than this to there. It was like 5 yards max. And with how you're positioning yourself, whether you're hunting an individual deer, whether you're hunting just a good spot that a buck might be coming through, and you just have that razor thin margin, especially with the wind and everything. How do you assess a setup where you're like, yes, I'm going to kill this buck at 5 yards, 10 feet before he smells me?
Wind is the easy part of it, okay? Because I can predict what the wind's going to do. There's times that I will be sitting in a stand, and if it's blowing 20 degrees off, I get my rear out of the stand, I get out of there, because I can't beat him there. I'm not going to sit and hope, what's the old saying, hope is not a method or methodology. I want to be as many consistent things in my favor as I can. But the other thing is with it, there'll be times like that one big 8 I told y'all about, that I'll see a certain characteristic, like I told you about seeing those big bucks middle of the day one time during a wind change, just get up and move. And I didn't know they were even in the area, but I saw them. And when I recognized that weather change again, I was like, man, I'm going to go get in that stand. Who knows? Maybe mother stand, maybe they'll come by me. And I did it and killed that big 8 out there. But it's being able to recognize, things like that really help out. Now, ask your question one more time.
Well, like talking about how you get the setup consistent. Now, actually,
I fine tune. That was
yeah.
I fine tune a lot. A lot of times I will go into a spot and I might err slightly to the conservative side. I'll set up, and if it doesn't work, I'll watch and just really, if the deer don't do what I thought they were going to do at that spot, but if I can actually see them, I can watch what they're doing and try to figure out. And sometimes it'll be simple as, it could be a blowdown. It could be, various things change it. I've watched certain patterns change as the season changes, as foliage changes. They may come through the same topographical feature, but they shift a few feet. Right there, if the gun or compound, it wouldn't matter. With me, it matters. There's one spot I've hunted for 20 years, and you look at this and like these deer come through and you're like, boy, they're going to walk right. This is perfect. Look the way this here, everything is in advantage, and they'll come up and they go make this weird and boop, 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 up. And I've looked at that over the years, and bucks are worse than the does. The does usually go one side. The bucks come and make a little 90, hook around, and then go back out. And I'm like, why are they doing that? And I cannot, and I've for 20 years. And last year, I actually shot a buck that my arrow went through, and like I said, 33-inch arrow, I'll have this much in him. Well, when it comes out, but he's point blank underneath me, and I shot him, and it's like, and I went down there and I pulled that arrow out of the ground. When he jumped, the arrow flipped out. I looked, and my broadhead's tip was curled around. And I'm like, what in the world did I hit there? And I thought about the bone, and I looked at it, and I was like, nah, that metal's cut. And I thought, I must hit a rock under there. Well, I went under these leaves. I've hunted it 20 years now. And I went under the leaves, and I got down at the ground looking where he's walking. And if you look at it, instead of it going like that, the ground kind of, I don't know if I can do my hand this way. Anyway, it goes up like that, and there's a 4-inch drop right there maybe. And it just goes a little bit like that, and this way, and then down. And these bucks always walked around this way, down under. Well, after I did that, I looked at that, and I thought, what in the world? And I thought, well, I'm going to see what I hit there. And I looked under there, and it's a rock, a plate of rock. It's probably 8 or 10 feet big right there, and there's a big outcropping of rock right there. And I looked at that, and all these years, why these deer walk that, they don't like walking across that hard rock. And it's under the leaves. I never knew it was there. And they just walked that little bit of drop, this much drop, was why the bucks walk around that way, because they don't want to walk on that rock. And I started thinking, well, why will the does do it? And I don't know if it's because they've got a wider base side to side. I don't know. But the bucks, 9 out of 10 of them will walk around that, under that. They don't like, and you'll see them walk up and they'll stop and they'll kind of turn and walk. And I've looked, and I've got down on the ground and looked at it, And I've got at their level and looked visually at it and everything, trying to figure out why are they not seeing what they want to. And it's just something they weren't feeling. They don't like that hard footing underneath them versus the softer stuff. But anyway, now I had my stand in fact, they get too close on that stand. That's one, I shot at 3 yards last year, at 5 yards. And a lot of times I have to wait till they're out away from me just so we get a better angle where I can get both lungs. But getting back to it, a lot of times I will fine tune the stand as much as if the opportunity's there. Now, this may be the only tree right here, so I may need to look at moving out the hill 50 yards, to still be hunting the same spot and have the right advantages to it. But, and the other thing with that, don't hunt this year like you hunted last year or 5 years ago, because the wood changes, your foliage changes in the woods. The dynamics of the woods changes. And so you need to really go in and, now there's certain trees that are killing trees. That's just, every year you're going to shoot a deer out of this tree. But sometimes stuff changes. So where this stand may have been hot this year, whether it's white oaks, whether it's, something we don't know, or you may move over here, stuff changes. So if you get in your stand and stuff's not quite the same, be able to reckon. Don't try what worked last year. Don't try to make it work this year. Make sure it is working this year, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And one follow-up, because Jacob's over here squirming, he wants a question. A lot of people you mentioned that the wind is the easiest part. And we're in eastern Tennessee in the mountains right now, and
which sucks.
Yeah, like the wind in the mountains is tough. So how do you get the wind consistent?
It's all in timing. That I may have a dropping thermal, and me personally in the mountain, dropping thermals are the most consistent. That's the strongest. My biggest advantage and the buck's biggest advantage a lot of times as far as consistency. You can't make the wind work. If you're in an area and you see it swirling every 10 minutes or 15 minutes, other areas, like I can think of an area over here that I hunt toward the top of ridge, just down over the side. And the first little bit of morning, I'll have a drop in thermal setting there, coming there. When I watch coming up the north side of the ridge where sun can hit, the way this thing faces the northeast, or when the easterly sun comes up and it starts heating that, I know about 2/3 of the way up when light gets there, that I'm going to start getting some rising thermals off it. So the other side of the ridge is getting, the southeastern side is getting all that side's heated up. So those thermals start coming up. Well, they rise and kind of meet, and you still got the drop in thermal off the north side, but they're rising over it. And so it'll start carrying it, a certain way there. And then by midday, it's squirrely and you got to get out of there. It's going to be blowing right to the deer everywhere. So, and that comes from just sitting there for years and watching it and just seeing what it does on, certain days, certain conditions in there. So a lot of it is just sitting in the area and learning it.
I would love to dive in more on thermals, because to me, paying attention to thermals kind of comes with a woodsmanship aspect. Can you, for listeners and viewers who don't understand the dynamics of thermals, can you explain? It's not as simple as rising in the morning and falling in the evening. Right. Under certain conditions. Can you better walk us through how thermals typically act around here? because there's a ton of outlying factors. But
they act the same anywhere. The first Easterner I heard talk about thermals. I'll take credit for a few things. Trail cams, I told you a while ago, we actually put the first trail cams I ever saw in use mid-'80s. We had those built and tried using them then. We did use them and using some security equipment as triggers and anyway. But we hooked up to video cameras. The grunting to stop a deer. When I was little, everybody, hey, and deer left the country. Well, when I found out, with research and stuff about deer vocalizations, grunts. And so I looked at it and I thought, man, I'm just going to make a deer sound at this thing. And this was, 45 years ago, and it's on video somewhere. Just stop them doing that. Thermal hubs. I used that term about 40 years ago on a video first time. And I learned thermals mule deer hunting out west about that. And so what I looked at, first of all, you have these hubs that animals travel through, intersecting trails and stuff, topographically, fence lines, whatever, where you get these hubs. Well, then I started noticing, I was talking about thermals on whitetail videos back then. And then I started to notice there's certain areas I've got wind coming in from multiple directions. And that's when I coined thermal hub back then. But with the thermal, all a thermal is a difference in air pressure. Everybody's familiar with hot air balloons or smoke rising off a fire. The warmer areas, further apart the molecules are. So mass is lighter, so it floats. That's why it goes up. It does not have the weight. There's not as many molecules. As it gets cold, it contracts. So more molecules come into the same space. It's heavier, it drops. Same thing happens with the air here. In the morning, you can be out before the sun comes up, and all your air is cool. Even the air coming down out, it's that. And it's just like water, it's heavy. What happens? Something heavy, it rolls downhill. Same way. So, morning, and as the sun comes up, it heats the air, expands the molecules, it rises. So it starts rolling up the hill. Now, here's one you've not heard about. Now, I'll tell you where the video you can watch this at here after we're done. But I've been watching. You ever watch buzzards fly? Mm-hmm. Here, they're riding warming thermals. Okay, does the thermal just do this? It circles. Mm-hmm. So you got to stop and think about it. Your thermals on the hills a lot of time are doing this. And that's, the rising thermals do that. The falling thermals are more, they fall more in a sheet pattern, or just like water does. But a lot of your rising thermals, when they get real strong, if you watch close, and you can, like mule deer hunting, you'll see it a lot of times. You'll see waves this way. So you have to be careful on that, whether it's donut rings that are rolling this way and rising, or if you have that counterclockwise rotation. And there's certain areas I go into and I watch buzzards fly, and if I see them all going clockwise and riding the thermal clockwise, well, that tells me they don't fly with the wind. They fly nose into the wind. So that tells me it's a counterclockwise going up the side of this basin or up the side of this ridge. So I know that rising thermal's probably going to be doing this a little bit, a slight side pattern. And if you've got a prevailing wind pushing it, that's in. So what does that mean? You've got the wind wind doing this way. It's just chaos. It's blustery. And so what's that tell you? That ain't a place I can hunt. I can't do anything. So the drop-in thermals are, they seem to be more consistent because they're more like water flowing downhill. And I've done a couple of demonstrations on this, and when I'm doing seminars somewhere. And if you guys that are listening really want to see this, take some dry ice, spread your blanket out coming down like that, especially a black piece of material, down off an angle with some, folds and stuff. Put your dry ice and water on top of it and just watch those vapors flow down it. That'll tell you what how thermals will work. And so with the thermal hubs, you may have these different hollows that, as we call them, drainages, whatever, that all collect into one area. We call it a turkey foot years ago, and that come in the area. Well, the advantage the buck can take, he can walk across that one little spot, come down one ridge, cross it, and go back up the other, and he knows everything that's above him before he goes back up to feed, or if there's hot does up there or whatever. And so that, now I'll give you one here. We're talking about if this is the end of a ridge, okay? Can you see it okay? This is the end of a ridge, and this is what I showed down at, and I walked these guys into it at Mountain Hunter seminar we did. If the sun is, say, like right here's a valley, or well, let's see, let me think how to do this, right? Say right here, this is actually level right here, okay, coming up just in back of this knob. And this is all shaded down in here, through here. Okay, sun's coming in, got all this hot back in here, all me back through here. Thermals are going to be doing this, right? Rising. This side of the hill, they're going to be dropping, and this is a knob, all right? Well, if you've got a little bitty draw, it's going to be stiffer through there. Then you've got a prevailing wind blowing this way. Well, coming down the direction of these arrows, that wind does this. Well, where is the air that's dropping coming from?
It's coming from the top of the ridge, but no?
Not all of it. Part of it's this prevailing wind right here. This is intersecting with the drop, and so it's pulling here. So this bucket walks around the end of this knoll here. He's smelling everything out here. I mean, walking down here, he's smelling everything that's coming out here and pulling down here. Some of this air gets pulled down through here. Well, the other thing that happens is that if this is another draw down in here, but this is hot, this hot air coming up in here, part of it's getting pulled over the top too. So this deer knows everything on top of this ridge right here. He can smell up above him. He can smell stuff coming around this way where it's being blown through here. All of this will be pulled. Part of it's still getting pulled down in that heavy dropping thermal. Well, I took these guys and showed them, and we walked in a 50-yard circle there, and we had 360-degree winds right there at 50 yards. And when I said there should be a bed up there, well, there wasn't a bed, but there was a signpost rub about that big. I've got a photo somewhere with me and Ethan there with it. And so those bucks, they can bed, and that's why they bed places like that. They've got that. Now, the other thing can happen is here you have your wind blowing this way out the side of the ridge. You've got thermals pulling still air up this way. But at the ground level, I promise you can do this, and you guys try it. You can go in, you can have a prevailing wind, but on a good, especially if there's a low seep that goes down through there, drainage, you can hold it to ground and drop leaves, dust, and it'll go right down that drainage. You can go 2 feet, 3 feet off the ground, go this way, your wind will go this way. It'll blow that way. And you can go and remember, some of this wind coming over the knoll is getting sucked from the opposite side of that ridge across there. So that buck walking certain little spots like that, he can basically assess this whole circle like that off the end of a ridge from just below the end. That's why your bucks a lot of times don't walk. If you got a saddle come around top or a bench right on the end of a little ridge, they don't walk it, they walk the underside of it. That because they can scent check, that way they pick up a bigger area off it. So you need to go in, if you're looking at a spot like that, and go down and do a scent check at ground level and at chest level, somewhere through there, and stop about and think about how many deer do you see walking through the woods, and you'll see them nose down, not to the ground sniffing it, but taking a wind down toward the ground and then head back up. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of people get caught in the tree stand. Say if you're hunting especially under a canopy, and you got a prevailing wind coming this way, and your deer are down here, and they get down here and they blow and snort at you, and it's like, man, my dust is going this way, going this way, going this way. Well, if you get down to the ground and blow, you have those underlying layers, and it's thermal layers. If you really talk to air conditioning people, HVAC people, they'll even in your air conditioning system talk about different on some of the bigger. I think it's called thermal laminates, maybe. The different layers, how they can interact over top of each other. So I always check. A lot of times I'll do stuff like hang a thread and a feather low somewhere and watch it. But there's a lot of different things. And even if your wind is blowing this way, but there's a big draw that comes down up in front of you, and your wind's blowing that way, and that draw's coming down, well, part of your air is going back down that hill.
So that shows a big advantage of why especially those big secondary ridge points have such a scent advantage for them. Mm-hmm. I've seen that on big east or north to south running ridges, that sun may set up top of that ridge at 2 o'clock, and you pretty much very quickly have a falling thermal if it's not a super strong wind day.
If a shadow, it's going to fall.
It will. And see, this is something that we talk about just from personal experience, and we've tested this. There's some ridges, especially like a big north to south run ridge. You get on the west side of it on the morning, it might not have a rising thermal at certain elevations until 11, 12 o'clock in the morning or afternoon, because it can't heat up the surface. Yeah. But there's a lot of people, they've always been taught you hunt high in the mornings, you hunt low in the evenings because of rising thermals. But it's not like instantly you have a rising thermal depending on where you're sitting in hill or mountain country.
Yeah.
And that's why I really want to kind of have you talk about.
And with the rising thermal, how do you get in there? You come from the bottom. So if you come up and to the side until you get in that rising thermal, so you have to go in late. You have to go in late. So if you have to come from the side. If you go up and out before that air is heated up, all the scent is going back down ridge. So everything below you smells you. All right. So you run into that problem, but then what happens as the evening gets the deeper those shadows get in the hollow, even though you may be still getting some rising, they're still sucking. So you're actually getting a rotation in there that some of us getting pulled down. So that's one of the things about hunting, high here. The only way I see that I do it is heading towards the end of a ridge to where I can offset to if I'm hunting a rising thermal here and I'm expecting the deer from this side, I want a strong dropping thermal on this side, and I want to set to this side. So even that rising thermal gets pulled, everything gets pulled back in there. So your access point gets here. Now here's a good one for you. If you really want to study your area you're hunting in the mountains in the winter for access and where you have heavy dropping thermals, go up after a snow melt. Just you've had snow on the ground and it's almost all melted down, go and glass the ridge you're looking at. You will see certain spots that the snow's not melted at the end. And why it isn't is because sunlight doesn't get to it. That will be your coolest part of the ridge the whole time. So next year when you go in, your access point is right up through, your access point is right up through where that snow melt, where the snow still has not melted. That's woodsmanship. It's cold air, stays there the whole time. And I mean that, I told that to Dalton. I sent him photos here 2 or 3 years ago. And Dalton's like, holy cow, I never thought about that. But access is like, that I said earlier, that's one of your top, that's 50% of a successful hunt. Not letting him know you're there. And while I'm saying that real quick, like you might go in one way and use a dropping thermal. You may not have a frozen spot, but in the morning I'm using a dropping thermal to get to this stand. Well, sun pops up and what are the deer doing? They're filtering up, going top of the ridge, all the does bedding, this and that. They're up in there, and ready to go. Say they're bedded over here. Well, so you're sitting right here and you've used this dropping thermal to get in the morning. Well, what's happening by the time the sun gets up? You got rising thermals. So if you go out the same way, your scent may blow up to where they're bedding. So they're going to know somebody was down there. And I really believe that at some point somebody comes down there and scent checks it to find out. So if the thermals are then rising to where you think they may be going, you may have to go this way to come out to have your thermals go with the prevailing wind. You may be a totally different way, and you may do that opposite. And that'd be a morning hunt. In the evening, you go in with the rising thermals going this way, and then you can go out that way. The way you came in the morning. So you may have to flip and you may have to do that totally different with the prevailing wind, whatever the predominant wind for that day is. If you've had a wind shift, stop and think, especially on a big buck that you're after, a certain buck, if you know where he's bedding, you have to get in there and get out of there without him smelling you. Or crossing your trail, so you don't want where you think he's going, you don't want to cross going into it, and you don't want your scent blowing to him, letting him know you're anywhere in the area.
Man. Hey, the snow thing is...
Kidneys.
The snow thing's really interesting because we actually got a big snow in Alabama last year, which is rare. And I had a spot exactly like you're talking about. It's kind of far from where I live, but I had cameras in there. And when I looked through the camera pictures, there's one spot where that snow stuck around for 3 full days, for longer than the whole rest of that area. So now that's got me wondering.
Well,
and that's where we get the biggest bucks on camera too.
Really? Above it or below, at the top or bottom?
It's at the top.
Okay. So see, if you got to get to the top, your access point is right up through there, and you've got dropping thermals probably all day long. Probably never any other unless you have a strong wind.
I know where Jacob and I are going to hunt a little bit more this year.
That's just common sense, man. I mean, I used to like my grouse dogs. I'd watch them run these mountains, and they'd get, we get this stuff, we called it fairy frost. It's big, ice freezes up out of the mud and stuff, and it'll be like fingers, growing up, just these beautiful crystals. But it may stay there for all day. And like I'd watch my dogs, they'd be working the sunny part, and then they'd run down to the bottom and back up there. But then once you'd see them hit maybe that bottom and boom, up to the grapevines on the side there, and they were scent checking it from below. That's all the dogs were doing. So, and I watched line dogs do the same thing, run in snow below the track, 50 yards down the hill, or, same way.
Yeah, we've got bird dogs, and also I've done quite a bit of deer tracking with my bird dog. And you'll see them run tracks like that, and or staying in more shade where all that thermal's pooling, and then going from there, find the scent, and then working out from there.
Yep.
And of course, you see bucks do that too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to that.
Let me tell you another one real quick while we're talking ridges, okay? These are finger ridges. Stop and think about this one. These are finger ridges coming off to here, all right? And there's the main ridge, but there you're hunting. Your prevailing winds are blowing across here. But just like now, I think the light's hitting this side of my fingers. Okay, that's sunny side, rising thermals. These are dropping thermals in the shade. Well, if this side is rising, it's pulling some of this thermal up from it's pulling scent some from here. But if this starts I'm doing this backwards actually. So these are slow. But if this wind drops in here, this rising thermal right here, it's taking some of the wind off this top of this ridge and pulling it when the rising thermal, when it gets to the top, again, where does this wind that's in the dropping thermal go?
Coming over the top.
Down. So it goes all the way to the bottom, picks up all the scent in there, plus scents here, up, some of it gets pulled back over. Same thing. And now it'll be very light over here, but an old buck coming up from the bottom, if this is it, he can come up this ridge right here, right through here, and he can scent check a great deal of the whole portion of here. If the prevailing wind's coming across, he can check 4 or 5. So he can get right to here and I'm just going to go on up the ridge here.
Interesting.
We've had a past guest talk about that.
Yeah.
Clifton Denny from Arkansas.
Yeah.
Yep.
He hunt those big finger points and hunt the back, the furthest one from those points, and that's the one he seems to see the deer running on. He talked about that too. Yeah. That's interesting.
So if there's 4 ridges running north and south, you got a westerly wind coming across all of them. You would hunt the easterly-most one because it's the last one in the line. That's what you're saying, right? Because it's hitting those ridges 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row, and then that last ridge, even though the scent might be faint, that older buck who knows what's up, he can hit that last ridge and he can smell all that stuff.
He's not getting just the scent of the prevailing wind. He's getting stuff from down in the hollows because the sunny side is pulling all the way up out of the bottom. So he's scent checking everything through there.
Man.
So, yeah.
Wow.
And I tell you how I discovered that was watching fog after a rain, and the sun would pop out. And I started, and I do this. This is another really good tip because I hunt with binoculars probably more than any whitetail hunter I know. And I'm not studying the animals, I'm studying the environment. So, but I watch these these little clouds do this. And it's like, how's that cloud getting sucked in there? Thermal's carrying it. Whoop. And you watch the whole thing roll and change. And, some of it would be carried straight across, some up and down. And, I learned that a long time ago watching that. We were elk hunting, it's been many years ago. And I had a buddy of mine, it's a game warden, hunting with me, and we had a herd bedded on a low mesa, up dark timber and all. They were on the north side. So we came down across the sage flats, got in, and I said, sit down. It's late evening. And I was like, we can't go no further. And he's like, what? I was like, we got to stay here. He goes, we got to get in there. So we can't move and just sit here. Well, he actually got a little hot at me, but I sat and I kept glassing. He goes, we got to go. I go, no, we can't go. Just wait. And I kept watching and watching. I said, let's go. And so we get up there. I make 3-4 calls. He runs an arrow through a nice 6-point. And it was over. And I mean, we hadn't been set up. I probably called that bull in within 3 minutes, 5 minutes. We got within maybe 100 yards of him. There was a little bench that we sat. But anyway, he's after. I said, man, that's always hugging. He said, why didn't we go earlier? I said, we'd have blown everything out of here. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, thermals weren't dropping. He goes, what? I said, I was sitting back and I was glassing the aspen leaves coming off the ridge, and they were still going up and out this way. And I said, once the shadow dropped, when I saw the aspen leaves starting to fall, I know those thermals are dropping off the side. It had cooled off enough and they wouldn't wind us. If we'd gone in before that, we'd have blown them out. And he looked at me just kind of like, he goes, man, you the man, just like, but that was it. But again, that is just, and the thing I was telling you about this, like I said, watching clouds, but I sat here a few years ago and I watched a hawk all the way across and I'm talking a few hundred yards, kill a bird, and was sitting there eating it, and I was watching it, and it was sitting in the shadows, right at the edge of the shadows, picking it, and all at once down feathers come floating by me. And I'm like, what? And I started watching. They were going down in the bottom and rising and back up. And, I saw those feathers doing that. And that's when it hit me like, oh my gosh. And that's why those bucks, those certain points, cross like they do.
Now, how do you have anything else? No. Okay. So how do you take that thermal, what we've discussed with thermals, how do you take that in this, let me backtrack. How do you take thermals in consideration now when you start talking topographical features, terrain features? How do you play that out? And I know there's a bunch of different ones, but if you're talking like that hill mountain country, how are you considering that? It
depends situation. Everyone is different. And a lot of times, and Nathan and I had this conversation last year, a lot of times you won't know till you get in there and sit down. I mean, because there's so many other little factors in there. I mean, there's generally places that I can look at and say, this is going good drop in thermal. If there's no outside influence, like, north wind, and it depends too, if you're talking, 2 to 3 mile an hour versus, at about around 7 miles an hour, consistent wind starts overriding thermals in a lot of places, or it causes too much of this, too much, and especially gusty winds, because you'll get, and then, suck back, and get those back eddies, and right then you're just wasting your time. So you got to be out somewhere more open, and to hunt, stand a chance there without getting winded. But everyone's different. I can think of a place I hunted years ago, that real big 8. I showed you guys that place. I actually jumped this buck out of a bed. I got in there and I found, first time I walked in scouting, I'd been looking at it on topos, and we walked in. My buddy went one way, I went the other, and I went in and found this little under the ridge top, coming around the knoll, little faint trail, and I saw this big old track, that crooked toe. It's like, holy cow, that's a beast. And so then I found another one, and I found this trail. I was like, right there's where that rascal, I bet's going through. And this is one people laugh at me over, but some reason big bucks like to walk, well, bucks like to walk across logs. I don't know why. But if you watch, you start watching, my buddies, I tell them that, they're like, you're right. He can either go around a log or he step across it, and he'll step across it. But anyway, when this one had stepped across this log, and I slip up on this little, just step bench on the side of the ridge, and I smelled him. I mean, just like, holy cow. I knocked an arrow, and I slip up, and I see this buck going up the side of the ridge. I just caught one view of the antler, and I mean, just when I looked at him, I was like, okay, and this scrape was in there. I mean, it was, and his beds was right there, and so I just backed out because he knew something wasn't right, but I could tell he didn't blow out, so I hadn't actually slapped him in the face. So, but I got looking at this area, and it's a hub that comes in there. It's 2 or 3 hollows, and other side, man, there's a bench comes around perfect. And looked at it, and it's like, man, there is no way. The way the prevailing wind comes in, you get all the way all the other side's bigger, taller, and then this side of the bowl. So these thermals are heavier dropping off. Well, did it again. They're bigger, heavier thermals coming off. So they're hitting it, and they're doing a lot of, and just no way to get it. And so I looked at that, and I thought the only way to hunt this is when you have a dead calm day, dead calm, probably heavy humidity. That's going to be no wind whatsoever, no sun hitting it. And I was sitting there one evening, I was sitting in another stand down from there, and it all at once hit me like, man, this is the deadest evening I've seen. There was a mist coming down, and it was just coming straight down. I mean, it wasn't blowing this way, that way. It was just, and I sit there, it's like 3 o'clock, and I was like, this is what I've been waiting on. It was 3 years later. And I took off and got up there, got in a tree, and within, I don't remember how long, it was shortly, he actually came the opposite way I thought he would. I was thinking he'd come off that bench, but he'd come around the side of the ridge going towards it. But, it was just, that was the day I recognized, that was the spot I recognized it's impossible to hunt. And what was funny, a few years later, again, I'll say Nathan, he was up there, and he sent me a bunch of screenshots, places he had scouted and all. And he sent me this one. I was like, holy cow. And I texted him. I was like, dude, what'd you see right there? And he started telling me, I said, did you by chance see a bone pile right there, an axe in a tree? He goes, well, no. And I go, that's where I killed Crook. And I said, exactly where? I said, you're within feet of where he died. And he's like, really? And I was like, yeah. I said, I was right across the hollow from him. Anyway, we talked about it, and I asked him, because I've got so much respect for his ability. I was like, that spot you just pinned right there, that scrape, and how would you hunt it? And he goes, I wouldn't. It's impossible to hunt. I said, okay, I feel better about myself, because I've thought for 5 years now on this, how could I hunt that spot? It's just, so much sign, so good. But he's like, you can't, and it's just what it is. And you got to be able to recognize that. You can't make it work. And so I don't know if that helps or not.
No, also, and this has come up a couple times in our conversations about certain situations needing a certain weather pattern or something to make a situation hunt right.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to just, at a 30,000 foot view, go over a couple of these, as in, like, you mentioned quite often, like, certain days in certain spots you have to have dead calm, falling thermals, overcast, certain situations like that. Because of the swirling winds, you need it dead calm to suck in thermals down. What situations, especially if we're talking more hill country or some of the mountains around here, could you hunt with moderate to higher winds, like over 7 mile an hour, where the thermals aren't playing as much of a factor?
I'm trying to think some situations, because everything you ask me, I think about different situations.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about right over here. Winds that either, if this is the ridge line, that are blowing, I would rather have them coming blowing this way if I'm figuring the deer are coming up, or if they're coming straight down, maybe blowing out the ridge is one way. And sometimes it depends if they're traveling the ridge this way, linear, if they're blowing straight up it and you have a rising thermal to go with that. So, but I would just, again, that would be a spot I had to walk into and sit and look. And this is a real good thing to do. People scout, right? So, and this works on trail cams too. When you set a trail cam up, two things on a trail cam: set a wind indicator with it. Piece of Spanish moss hanging off, a thread or something, where you can actually see which way the wind is blowing when you're seeing the deer. It'll give you, along those lines, because what the weatherman says and what the trail cam is seeing is going to be 90% of the time, 99% probably totally different. So do a wind indicator so you have an idea of what the wind was actually at the spot you're seeing the deer. And you can do two. You can do one lower, and then you can do one up higher. I've seen people use flagging tape too, but I always try to use something that, more natural through there. So, that's a good way. But so that's with trail cams. To your point, go in and just sit there. I mean, now it doesn't work if you're right in the middle of season and find it. But if you have the opportunity, go sit there. Go, say if we got a westerly wind coming in, go over there and sit for 30 minutes or an hour at daylight or till the sun rises up one morning, and just watch the wind after season or before season, because when the leaves are on versus the leaves off, your thermal patterns are different. So but go in and study. Otherwise, when you're in stand, study it. Remember, this morning I didn't have any wind, and this is what happened. So when I said there's no wind, what's so important about that is that gives you the base. You have to have a base to start from on a lot of stuff. So at zero wind, what does that tell you? That tells you what the thermal patterns are at that time. So okay, this is what the thermal patterns is. Then you can say, so that's, that is point A. Everything else will go off it. If I have a westerly wind, the thermals will stay the same, but they're going to be changed by that wind. So you can see, what's happening with that. And then same thing midday, same thing evening. Something to think about too. You can go, well, it depends when your leaves go off. But you say, well, I don't want to go in during November and see what these patterns are. Well, stop and think about when the sun is basically when you're coming into spring. Basically, when the sun's back close to the same pattern, when it's moving back down or moving back up to the north. So figure out, okay, in November, I have this southwesterly sun, or, the south, it's more toward the south sky. Mm-hmm. So it's down here. So when does the same basic pattern come up in the spring? So you can go in the spring and read basically the same thermals just at 6 months across or whatever it is. Something close to it. You can be within a month of it and tell. But, those little bit, if it's enough of a difference between the north and souths, position of the sun to make a difference on those thermals. As there's less, one thermals will become less than that. So does that make sense? So you can go and scout the winds in that area.
Oh, yeah.
It's common sense. That way you aren't spooking your deer. Plus you're in there telling, seeing the sign that they're scouting from what was left in the season.
I want to know this selfishly. You surround yourself over the years with phenomenal bow hunters, absolutely top tier bow hunters from across the country. What are some of the common traits that you see these guys have in common that make them an excellent bow hunter?
They love it. I mean, it's a passion and a lifestyle. But the best ones I know, I'll say it's not who they are, it's something they do. And they focus on family and God, first. And so they keep it in perspective, because a lot of people, people get caught up in the commercial side, or trying to be, this or that. It's just a stinking deer. Be a good person. Don't base who you are on how big a deer you killed. Base, when you're out there being, just being appreciative and humbled by everything, God has graced us with there. And that's the biggest thing I see on these guys. They just love it. They love each other. They, and like I said, I don't look at a lot of the, that I've known as the mega hunters. I look at them as the mega men they've been. Like Gene Wenzel, holy cow, what an individual. I've said this over and over. I watch him. His wife has dementia, Alzheimer's, later stages. Most devoted husband that I've ever seen in my life. And I respect him 1,000 times more than, for the bow hunter he is. And so, but all of them, everybody asks every one of us, I mean, well, what's your secret this and what's your secret that? And I mean, Gene and I've talked, a lot of us have sat and talked about it, and there's no secret to it. I mean, you do the basics, you follow the basics, you do things the right way. It's the same with life. You do things the right way, and for the right reasons, with respect, and you work hard. If you want a shot at a good buck, follow the basics. Do everything right. Like I said, from being able to make sure you can make that draw, make that shot, to, make sure your access is good. All this, I'll just say this, all this scent, killer, blah, blah, blah. If the wind's wrong, you're busted. Now, where it does help, it might be less hits them at a distance, so you may seem further, but that I'm 50-50 on, because from schooling, from the educational stuff that I did, there's a it's not the amount of scent, it's the degradation of the scent. It spoils real quick, very quickly. But just the basics and time on stand. People are like, how in the world you kill a buck like that every year, or every other year? And it's like, I sat in the stand 102 times last year. 102 times. I tagged out at 78 on bucks, but I sit there at 102 times. Because what am I doing then? I could shoot a doe if I wanted to. I don't think I did that year. No, I take it back. I did. I shot, but early on, I shot another couple of does. But what I'm doing, I'm sitting out there and I'm watching what's happening for years to come, and I'm learning. I'm trying, fine tune, try to figure out. Because, man, I see a deer do something, and the first thing I'm doing, like, why did it do that? And, and it may be nothing to do with right where we're at. But here's another thing to pass on to everybody. You've got 100 acres to hunt. Well, why that deer's doing something may be a mile away from you. Why you're not seeing that deer, maybe, remember we talking about point A, point B, point C? Well, somebody may have screwed up his point C, so that affected him all the way around. So it may be nothing you're doing wrong. It may be outside circumstances. Situation has changed. So that's like, I'm right now, I do all year. We're driving miles around the area areas that we hunt. And like last night, one spot that we hunt, one of the areas that one of the pods of does that will be later in the year, come November, December, they're building a new house. And so that's going to point D is going to be changed. Now, how it changes, it could make us better, or it could completely mess it up. But so you kind of look, and like the things that you think will change one way, like there's one area I hunt, it's a big cornfield about a mile from where we hunt, and we're full of white oaks. And I thought the year that they didn't plant the cornfield, I thought, man, we are going to be eat up with deer this year because they're going to be at early season. It was the worst early season I've seen. There was no corn. Our white oaks were falling, but they weren't there. And, like that was a preconceived idea. I should have been thinking, there's going to be a change. I'm interested in seeing what this change is going to be. And I don't know what that year, what caused it, but yeah, the early season wasn't near as good. It was like 3 weeks after before it started picking up.
Well, Alan, I think that's a really good note to wrap up on. And I wanted to give a shout out to the Stick Boys podcast, which you're a part of. Dalton helped hook us up. Best in the business for traditional bow hunting, for sure. You guys do a great show.
Well, I appreciate it.
And you mentioned the Professional Bow Hunter Society. You want to wear that shirt and give them a shout out? What do they do?
The professional is just ethics. It's not being a professional hunter. But it's a group, and it's knowledge through experience. It's in my opinion, probably some of the best bow hunters in the world. Well, the most successful bow hunters in the world. Most of them are trad guys. But like I said, nothing against compounds or, it's rifle hunting, whatever. A lot of rifle, black powder, whatever. But it's just a good organization that promotes. We have a lot of, there's membership hunts that, everything from elk to Alaska to, it opens up all kinds of stuff. Mexico, and guys will get just a bunch of good bow hunters that like getting together. And they do a lot of the great publications. One, it's as good as, it's like with traditional bow hunter magazine. They're the magazine they put out quarterly. It's great, but just promotes bow hunting and also taking part in legal action, legislation that's going on, keeping people informed what's going on. We'll contact about certain votes if like they're trying to ban lion hunting or, somewhere. Everybody will jump in on it, and, not saying you bunch of idiots, this and that, very professionally addressing these things. But if you ever go to one of the banquets or you talk to people, I mean, it's like a big family reunion. And like I said, you've got some of the very, very best bow hunters in the world that are there, that have, shot everything, polar bear, Africa, everything. And but the cool thing about it, like you were saying earlier about some people I've known, they're just bow hunters like me and you. It's no different. It's just they've had different opportunities and worked their butts off to get those opportunities. And they're sharing it. And it really, PBS, like I disappeared after I left the TV show. I wanted nothing to do with the industry, anything. And Barry Wenzel, Aaron Miller, they talked to me about, like, man, there's a lot of stuff we've got to share and really ought to start. And especially with my son, it's like, that's why I've taken back over the podcast now with Stick Boys, but is try to make bow hunting better. I've had my run, I mean, if I never kill another animal rest of my life, it would not bother me a bit in the world. I mean, I've got enough memories that I can smile if I live to be 100 years old. What's important to me now is my son's future, your guys' future, your kids' future, our grandkids. And if we don't stand up and we don't do something to make a difference with it, they're not going to have what we had. They're losing stuff every day. So, it to me, just like somebody invading this country, I'll bleed out, taking out whatever threat to it. And the same way, with bow hunting, I just want to make sure that I do my part, that they have a better chance. And a lot of the kids, excuse me, a lot of the kids today don't have mentors. And there's nothing better than sitting back, whether it's on a fly stream and river, showing the kid, or even guys older than me, and that's getting hard to do anymore, but, how to fish this area and watching them catch fish and being happier for them than I am myself catching one, or, and that's the way PBS guys will do. If you sit and tell them about you shot a 50-pound doe, they will be as happy as can be for you. No, just because they've shot something big or this and that, they're just big bow hunters themselves that love it. And so that's why I got involved with PBS and, doing stuff like this. Frankly, I'm pretty much a loner. I've got like 2 or 3 friends I hang with, and that's it. We build bows and flint knap and, and just enjoy that and family. And but now we all have to do our part, and I commend you guys. The turkey series you did, I watched this spring, and I loved that because I love turkey hunting too. And but that's the other thing with the podcast is trying to. One of the things we're doing is woodsmanship extremely heavy, like the Wind series we did, that 5-part series last year, to really talk about what we did, thermals and all, and across the nation and stuff, and to these people that don't have mentors or don't understand, try to give them at least to know what to look for. And we're doing that, and then the legacy series, like we did Fred Bear, Paul Schaefer, and we're doing a lot of the people that are gone that we owe so much to, and that deserve the respect because they were the guys that fought to get us the bow seasons we've got today. And I don't want them forgotten, because if we, especially this younger generation, if they don't know how much it took for us to have bow seasons today. They'll lose it. They don't know what they think. It's just a right. It's not. It's something we've got to make sure somebody there's fighting for them. And PBS and Pope and Young and a lot of these are doing what they can to do it. And you guys are doing your part. We're trying to. So anyway, that's.
I want to ask you one thing about PBS. Do they do any kind of banquets or live events or anything like that?
Yeah, we have the biannual, and they have it every year, and then there's odd year gatherings every other year. Then
are they regional? Or are they always in one specific location?
No, the big one will be next year, and I think it's Indianapolis, and it's fantastic to go to, and it's cheap. You can be an associate member. I think it's $35 a year, and a regular member you have to be voted in for it, and it's I think $55. But you get your magazine with it. It opens you up for the different hunts. It's like I don't know if y'all saw that bear Brian Kelser killed this year. It is the most, let me say 2 bears. He killed just a monster grizzly this year. And then he turned around in a chocolate phase, black that. Unbelievable. I'll show you photos. Unbelievable. But it's a very special place in Saskatchewan. Well, this year they're having a PBS hunt there. That there'll be 6 people on the hunt, but if you're a member, you could be the 6th. You're in a drawing for the 6th hunt up there in this place. You have a really good chance of killing a Boone and Crockett bear. Lots of 20-inch bears up there. And I mean, Gene Wenzel sends me videos. He goes up with them and Brian and them, and you're looking, that's a 400. That's legitimate 400-pound bear. That's a 20-inch bear. It's a 21-inch bear. And just, the most unbelievable black bear hunting. But anyway, they're doing that for this year. And again, the hunts, they've got elk hunts. They've got Alaska, everywhere. And no, they may only take a dozen people, but if you get on the list, you can get up there, but it's first come, first serve. And and members like Ron Burnham's going to have one up here in Virginia this year, a whitetail hunt, I think, in Bath County. And so, yeah, it's pretty cool. But they just love being with each other and helping each other out.
Well, I wanted to ask if they had live events for the reason of we get asked all the time of newer hunters, and they're not kids. A lot of them are 30, 40-year-old men getting into hunting about finding a mentor.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily someone they can go in the field with, but someone who they can talk to.
Yeah.
And I feel like PBS might be a pretty good way to network with other hunters that way more experience, but you could maybe find somebody you could talk to remotely.
Yeah.
And have like a mentor that you could talk to and build a relationship potentially with those guys.
I'll tell you, you can probably call hey, I need somebody hunting southwestern Texas. I need information on javelina hunting down there. And there'll be a bunch of people that, you could just put that in the group form and people would be back to you. I need information on, elk hunting, northern Colorado. And you'll probably have 6 to 10 responses back, people that hunted it and that are good hunters that will give you legitimate, good. And like last year, Gene Wenzel got broke, or they had a plane issue, and just I think his daughter dropped the post for him, and there were like 14, 15 PBS members. Hey, we got you. What you need? Just right back. So yeah, that's if you're a member and you're in there, and and it's a good thing overall. As far as helping, the future of bow hunting. But knowledge through experience, and they love sharing it. I put it this way, like I'm a flint napper, and you go these flint nap-ins, and the guys there are some of the most giving of their knowledge that I've ever met in my life. It's like how people, it's the way old villages and stuff were probably, is what I like to think about. Everybody survived because of everyone else. And when I got into PBS, that's what I found out, that it's the same kind of people. They love helping out. They love, sitting back and, if you got a problem or need to talk through, helping you out. And when you go and sit down with them and meet them, it's just a fantastic group of people.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well,
yeah,
Alan, we'll say this. We greatly appreciate the time you spent with us.
Well, I've enjoyed it.
And have you on the show. And I will say this as well. I hope you give us the opportunity to come back again.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's so much more to talk about.
Yeah.
And we don't have enough time in the day to do it.
Yeah.
But, it's exciting to have you on here, getting you to share some of your thoughts and knowledge. And hopefully the viewers and listeners picked up a lot, because I know Andrew had, from these conversations. So just greatly appreciate your time for this.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope it helps somebody out, because that's, if we can pass on some of the knowledge, it's just going to help my kid down the road too. So, but yeah, thank y'all for coming. And after we're done with this, we'll have some fried turkey here in a little bit.
Awesome. Perfect.
That sounds good to me.
Well, yeah.
For all the viewers and all the listeners out there, thank y'all for watching. Thank y'all for listening. And we'll catch you back here in the next episode from the Southern Outdoorsman podcast. And remember, guys, y'all stay Southern.